Can a defense be so bad that it limits the offense's potential for the whole season? That and more this week on the couch. So pleased to be joined by my good friend Paul Charchian this week. I'm not going to blurt it out, but there's a certain team I have on the brain, Paul, when I ask you, can a bad defense be bad, maybe really bad, for the fantasy offense that it plays with?
For sure. I mean, if your defense is bad enough, your offense isn't on the field enough, right? So your defense is giving up long, sustained drives. It's taking the ball away from your offense. Your defense is getting you down 20 points at half, and now your running game gets obliterated. That they work hand in hand. It's a tandem for sure. Great defenses give you great field position. Now you don't have to cross the 50 as often. You're into the red zone more often. The two go together, and sure, there's certainly distinctions. I'd rather have a good offense, but yes, there's a point at which a defense can be bad enough that the whole offense ends up being affected. And we may be seeing some of that start to play itself out, even beginning in week 1, Sig. And
right,
there were obviously a number of defensive performances that made you go, wow. Although mostly teams underscored what we expected. But yes, there are some cases like that.
Yeah, we're going to start out with worries, okay? Not to be a downer.
All right.
Not to be a downer, but we're going to talk about things that are may be worried about or is right to be worried about. The whole name of the game right now. And Paul, this is like maybe the most important. I want to put too much on it. This week, these early weeks are so important. How you react, what actions you take or don't take based on the very limited sample size we have. Some of it is going to be early indicators of big trends. Some of it is going to be false negatives, false positives. And we have to at least try to sort it out. I mean, one thing, why even play fantasy football if you're like, oh, I don't know, so I'm just going to wait and see. Well, just, watch football and enjoy football then. Fantasy football is about putting little wagers on what you think is going to happen. So pick some things that are going to happen. And really with these worries, it's like, is this something that we have to adjust for? And I think that if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown even are fine, then you'll look back and say, well, Joe Burrow never does anything against the Browns. Joe Burrow always comes out of the gate a little rusty. Week 1's not great for him. And this is just going to be a blip. And I think that the second half of the game when they were getting 3 and outs, things like that. And the offensive stats just kind of stopped at halftime and didn't accrue anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's give the Browns defense some credit, but they only had 3 possessions, unless you count getting the ball back with 23 seconds left. They only had 3 possessions in the first half. They scored touchdowns on 2 of them, but they only got 3 possessions. And they were playing and this is the part where my brain just goes, the Browns. They were playing the Browns. They were playing Joe Flacco and Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford, who could not run the ball. By the way, the Browns could not run the ball at all. And they almost had 36 minutes time of possession. What's going to happen when they play an actual offense?
I would contend the Browns are going to be one of the most improved offenses and we didn't see it in week 1, but there's a lot of reason for optimism with this offense, in my opinion. Cedric Tillman looks very promising when he's not, giving the ball to the opponents. If you go back through his starts, he started a clump of games in the middle last season that were all sensational. And then last week he was really good. Jerry Jeudy's got to stop dropping balls, but otherwise he's capable as well. Harold Fannin looks like a revelation. David Njoku was already good. And if this running game can just cobble together something better than what we saw last week, Jerome Ford's probably going to be the odd man out before long. I'm really interested in this offense when Kevin Stefanski hasn't had his career shackled to Deshaun Watson. He's proven himself to be a great offensive mind, coach of the year winner 2 times. It's, if they hadn't gone down that path with Deshaun Watson, it'd be a whole different story on the career arc for Kevin Stefanski and the Browns organization.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Stefanski because I think that's your main argument in favor of the Browns offense. And kind of a mirror situation is what's going on in Pittsburgh, where you have this offensive mind, and if you just give him an old farmhand quarterback who can just run the plays the way they're supposed to be run, then the offense will at least be functional, and it'll be better than the worst scoring offense in the league, which is what the Browns had last year. Although And it was some kicking. They should have had 20 at least if it wasn't for the kicking game. But
Yes.
still, I mean, again, the data points will continue to compile, and we'll start to understand. We'll recontextualize everything we've already seen. That's one of the fun things about playing fantasy football is what you've already seen changes. It actually changes when you see the next data point, and we'll watch this week. Cincinnati's going to play Jacksonville. So what does Jacksonville's? If Jacksonville was 40 on them. Now Cleveland 16 looks like, well, they're going to be one of the worst offenses again. We'll see what Al Golden can do to rally Cincinnati. And I just think that what was surprised me, Paul, was I made a poll on Twitter this week. It was like, would Jamar Chase be the number one pick if we drafted today? And the two choices were, yes, are you stupid? And no, are you stupid? Because I kind of think that's how it is, right? Like that's where we are right now. Like there's some people that'll say it's only one game. Why would you change that meaningfully? Are you stupid? And there's other people saying like, would he have 2 catches, just like 4 targets? I mean, just that if you take a player number 1 overall, they should be able to influence the game every single week. Doesn't matter how far awry it goes. I mean, he had almost no influence on the game at all. And that's kind of scary for a player that you're saying of all of the players in football,
right? The whole pool.
He's the most valuable. Like, really? Should that happen when you're saying that? Like, why wouldn't you back off of Jamar Chase? But I guess I was like 65% said no, Jamar Chase would still go number 1. I mean, I guess some people are saying they're doing like those drafts that start at week 2 and it's happening. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, okay. Then let's answer your question. I still would take Jamar Chase number 1 because I believe we'll go back and look at this as a remarkable fluke that's totally out of line with what we know, everything we know about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. What would you do if you had 101 right now? You're starting a new draft this week.
I know a lot of people have Bijan Robinson, one among running backs, and I think here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The Tampa run defense is impenetrable, right? And Tyler Algier, 19 snaps and like 10 or 12 carries. But the point is, of the meaningful workload in the backfield, Bijan Robinson has to share with Tyler Algier. They both got stoned at the line of scrimmage a lot. And Robinson still had a 100-yard receiving game and looks fantastic. You got to go back to like LaDainian Tomlinson to think of somebody that out of the backfield just looks so, and like Marshall Faulk, like guys that just look so natural, gathering in the ball, turning into run after catch mode, and just going back into running back mode. Like it's so beautiful, kind of like poetry in motion, the way that he can go from gathering in the ball to taking on and engaging the defense and making things happen. So that would be my answer.
Let me ask you this as a transition point, because we're all obsessed with Arthur Smith, and we saw how he used Bijan Robinson early in his career. Bijan basically, he was very lightly used for the first 10 weeks of his career, despite being the 8th player taken overall. And then Arthur Smith comes in week 1 and just buries Kaleb Johnson. It ended up just, I don't to 1 carry, -3. No, something in that.
Yeah. Ballpark? 1 carry, 2 snaps. Yeah.
Right. And you almost wonder, is it spite? I mean, is there something in here? I mean, what is it? What is the forces in his mind that makes him feel that you've got to somehow earn it first? You've got to pass some series of trials before he's going to grant you, and even to his own detriment, grant you the playing time that you should get.
Well, I think that there was some foreshadowing here. Mike Tomlin talked about Kaleb Johnson after one of the games, saying, there was a preseason game when he looked hesitant, indecisive. And he said, that's the stuff you got to work through as a rookie. And I think he looked a little better as preseason went on, and there were some more positive things as the summer went on about Kaleb Johnson. However, there was a point, Paul, that I moved him down in my rankings pretty significantly in the last 2 weeks of draft season, because it seemed pretty clear that Kenneth Gainwell was going to have a role. Every time they talked about the backfield, they talked about Kenneth Gainwell. They said, this is before they came out and said that Jaylen Warren is the lead back. I mean, Jalen Warren himself said that he went and remade his body this offseason to handle more work. So, I mean, obviously they told him you're going to have more work next year. So like, where's the work for Kaleb Johnson? And then on top of that, the Steelers just aren't an inspiring offense. And we'll get back to that. We'll put a pin in that because that's a good thing to talk about. So I thought we're talking about a third string running back in an offense that is uninspiring. But to your specific point, I think there's parenting here, right? It's this idea that you don't raise a football player that is part of your culture by giving them anything. And I think there's some coaches that feel that way. I thought it was interesting too that Darius Slayton, when they asked about Jackson Dart this week, said something to the effect of Jackson Dart is good. You know, we think he's good. Russell Wilson's the starter, but you all got to know that sometimes throwing a player into the fire right away isn't the right thing. Yeah. It's not the right thing to do. Now, a quarterback obviously is a much more challenging position.
That's a different story.
But
that's right.
Yeah, I think some of that informs these coaches whenever they're taking that. But I do think, to your point, to bring up Kaleb Johnson, I mean, I think he has to be a drop right now because you're so far from the chain of events where he would have value. Because even if Jalen Warren goes down, you see Kenneth Gainwell got more than 50% of the snaps. So that's not going to change. And the Steelers, it worked. The offense worked. I mean, why would you change anything?
It did. Yes.
You know, so I think that you mix in Kaleb Johnson and the presence he has maybe as a kind of a finisher as the season goes on. But I think nothing that happened in week 1 is going to make Arthur Smith think that he should change. Not that he ever thinks that anyway.
So let's talk just psyche of fantasy players for a minute. You drafted Kaleb Johnson in 8th round, maybe. Yeah. I don't have his ADP in front of me, but let's call it the 8th round. So now you've got an emotional stake in Kaleb Johnson. And I think there's a real hesitation to just drop him outright. And it's 2 parts. One is you've got to acknowledge your error, and people don't like to do that. And then the second part, Sig, is, well, what if he's good later?
Right. Well, what if I was right? What if I was right? What if
I was right?
What if I was right? And you have to, and this is another situation where, again, I mean, at its essence, and this is perfect on the couch topic. Thank you, Paul. This is why you're the ideal on the couch guest. At its essence, fantasy football is making decisions with limited information. You're always going to have limited information, and you have to be willing to just like, okay, yeah, we know, like when people say, well, I'm not, well, yeah, we all are making decisions. We're all setting our lineups every week with some sense of uncertainty about what's going to transpire week to week. I mean, the week to week variance is what makes fantasy football. It's what makes it maddening, but it's what allows it to become some sort of weird skill to be better than other people at roughly guessing what's going to happen. And this is going to be a fun little segment, Paul, because you just opened up my mind to a segment here, because I think there's a lot of players that you like mentioned, the example of Kaleb Johnson, where you drafted them high enough that part of you doesn't want to let go. This is our whole thing at the end of our waiver wire segment, right? We'll say, hold on, Wilson Phillips, or shut him down like a Public Enemy with some of these players, right? And we talked about this. So let's I'm going to toss these guys up, and you just give me your gut reaction, and assume that there's somebody good enough. I mean, I can even give you, to get quick.
No, you don't need to. Don't need to. Yep, I'm with you. So and if your refusal to drop a player then cascades all the players you can't pick up and all the things you can't do with your team.
Yeah,
and if you're just going to stubbornly, I can't be wrong on Kaleb Johnson, that every single week that's a roster spot you're not filling with somebody else that could change the trajectory of your team. Yeah. Okay.
And I will assume, for the benefit of the people listening, I will give a player, although you understand the spirit of this exercise. Okay, so if you had to drop Isaiah Pacheco to get Quinson Judkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
I told you I think I would do it. Pacheco, I'm rattled by his usage. Kareem Hunt has nothing left.
Yeah.
Nothing. And yet he was out there getting roughly even snaps and carries. That's a massive, massive red flag. And Judkins is the kind of move that wins fantasy leagues.
Yeah.
Not necessarily guillotine leagues, but regular fantasy leagues where I have to be the best of 12 teams. I've got to hit that 8% window. And that's the kind of move that when it pays off bigger than Pacheco can pay off.
Yeah, and I mean, let me throw it. Like, what if instead it was like to pick up Daniel Jones or to pick up Kayshon Boutte or pick up Juwan
I love
Johnson.
Kayshon Boutte.
Yeah, okay.
And I bet you
So
know all
you're
about him.
interested. I mean, so these names are compelling enough for you to say, like, well, yeah, if I have to drop Isaiah Pacheco to get one of the like, it sounds like you're not even hesitating to drop Pacheco for Boutte.
No, but Boutte was you don't know this. He was my big, every year we all
Yeah.
attach ourselves to one total unknown guy. He was my guy.
Good job.
His story's so fascinating, Sig. And I know you're going to know a lot of this because it's so much of it is grounded in Louisiana.
Mhm.
But for the sake of your listeners, if you don't mind, I'd love to tell a
Yeah.
little bit about his story. Kayshon Boutte was one of the greatest high school prospects to come out of Louisiana. 5-star recruit, could have gone to literally any Division I college that he wanted to play wide receiver. Ultimately decided he wanted to stay near family and chose LSU. Has a fantastic rookie year. Freshman year, has a good sophomore year, but then things start derailing for him personally, and he starts making some bad decisions. The worst of the decisions, he bet on his own team.
Mhm.
And of course, that's a death sentence. And so he gets kicked off the team. And now he's young. He's only, I think, 20 at that point, and he's got to enter the draft. Kayshon Boutte's got to enter the draft way before he ever should have. So enters the draft. Patriots end up, the talent level had him earmarked to be a day 1, day 2 wide receiver pick in an NFL draft. He ends up going much later. Patriots take him, and it takes him a couple of years before the light kind of comes on with Boutte, and he's now ready to contribute. And then the end of last year, we saw 2 big games, week 16, week 18, where that offense featured him, and he was up to that. And I saw that as, okay, this could be a real indication of things to come for him. And then fortunately, week 1, he turned out to be he and Diggs were basically 1-2s. They were on the field a lot. He ended up leading the team in targets, receptions, yards. And Boutte, if you believe Drake May is going to be an improved passer on an improving offense, Diggs at his stage of his career is not necessarily the guy that you want to be investing in long term, especially in a dynasty or empire league. I think Boutte's a fascinating prospect who you get almost for free right now. He just costs you a roster spot.
Yeah, we could have seen this coming. And I remember that, Southeast Louisiana guy, New Iberia, went to LSU, which is like how many of the best 10 receivers in the NFL right now?
Yeah, no kidding.
And he was actually playing ahead of some of those guys, right? Like he was ahead of Malik Neighbors at that time. He was actually like on the same football team as Malik Neighbors and playing ahead of him. And I think. And when I saw that he was drafted by the Patriots, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting because if Belichick keeps him, then that tells me that he's malleable, that he's ready to do the okay, I have to listen to somebody else if I'm going to make it. And his career has gone in fits and starts, like you said, until the end of the season. And then they went to the well with Kyle Williams, and they signed Mac Hollins, and they signed Stephon Diggs, and then Demario Douglas. And this is where I'm like the king of this, Paul, where it's a situation, but I picked the wrong player. Because I agreed with you where I thought, well, Stephon Diggs is not, I don't know if he's an alpha really anymore. And they kept talking about Demario Douglas in the spring and early in the summer. But late in the summer, Tom Curran and Jeff Howe, and Jeff Howe's now a national guy, both put buzz items out there about Boutte. So one, I think Howe said stunning turnaround, and Curran said that he thought he was going to outproduce Stephon Diggs. So there was that right before the season, there was your foreshadowing. And and then the other thing was that I always see, like, he's only, like you said, he's only like 21. He's only, this year, he's the same age as a lot of the players that were drafted this year.
That's right.
So
yes.
So recontextualize, like, what would you be thinking about him if he was doing this as a rookie? But in some ways, it worked out for him because he got the NFL seasoning. He hung around. He kept passing the test of being worth a spot on the roster until he developed. So yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think that he's a wonderful story to talk about. And I love that you wanted to tell his story because the story was what led you to the interest. And that's why I'm the mayor of Narrative Street. But that's also why but we're trying out right now, Paul. We're trying out what about this narrative? Let's try to fit what we just saw in a larger narrative. Well, it can fit in lots of larger narratives, but let's pick a few that may be actionable and just kick them around, right? So let's touch on some of these worry situations. I want to talk about Jacksonville again, because the great thing here is we're going to get a data point in week 2 against the Bengals defense that is just atrocious. I mean, against the pass. Well, I mean, really, the Bengals defense, again, almost 36 minutes time possession to the Browns, at a point when they're putting the pieces together of that offense. But Jacksonville last week, there's Travis Etienne. We could talk about Travis Etienne. I mean, I don't see any reason to Etienne. I'm just going to take the L on that. I mean, I guess it really just took.
Me too.
It really just took
Me
a
too.
different running game. I mean, I guess it was just
Yep.
a different running game, and all of a sudden his talents rise to the surface, or at least against Carolina, which is another team that looked kind of like, you go to the ocean. I think about the ocean, Paul. Like the stuff that's dead in the ocean, it just kind of floats different. Like your brain immediately is like, dead thing. And like the Carolina, Miami, dead thing. There's a dead thing in the water. Carolina maybe kind of looked like that in week 1 a little bit too. So, how valid was that result? But the scarier part for fantasy is Brian Thomas caught one ball and he at least scored on a rushing touch.
Run.
Travis Hunter got 6
Thank
catches.
God.
They were all short catches. Brenton Strange was the leading receiver. De'Ami Brown also involved. And Trevor Lawrence didn't look like he was a maestro in this offense.
Nope.
So are we worried? I mean, this is one of those ones, again, like there's a list of players that you could sell for like 75 cents on the dollar and win pretty big. Is Brian Thomas one of those guys?
Yes. I mean, we know he's a great receiver. We've seen all the traits. And man, I love buying great players on the cheap from a panicking owner. That's how you win championships. If I can pay 70 cents on the dollar for Brian Thomas there's no chance Liam Cohen's gonna ice him out. He's too good. And he was targeted 7 times. I mean, it's you're capped by the upside that Lawrence brings. But nevertheless, I've got so much more faith in this coaching staff than the previous one that I believe Liam Cohen will get this thing turned around. And I'd love to buy Brian Thomas right now. That seems like a gift waiting to happen.
Yeah, well, and go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to pivot for a second to the trade from yesterday, but if you want to wrap up thoughts on
to the Eagles.
Yeah. Because talk about taking your L's. I've wanted Tank Bigsby to be a workhorse runner for his entire career. I've got, all the data behind me. I'm like, okay, among players in the last 2 years, at least 200 carries like Tank Bigsby. Look, he's top 5 here. He's top 5 here. He's top 5 here. He's top 5 here. All he needs is a coaching staff that's going to give him a chance. So I finally get the new coaching staff. I've got somebody who's ready to make him the new Bucky Irving. And it lasted 1 week.
Yeah.
And it all melted down.
Yeah, it was certainly one that's tough to go back and look for the signs, because there were days of practice that Bigsby, there were reports, it's practice, Allen Iverson practice, but he was the superior back. We understood that Liam Cohen did dispel pretty, not in some sort of, I don't know anything about that. But, when they asked him about the trade rumors about Etienne, that they didn't like Etienne, he said, no, we never, there's no truth to any of that. So that maybe was one of the clues we could have looked for. But I think even someone like Bashal Tootin, because of the Bucky Irving connection, you see after week 1, like how far he is. And they signed Cody Schrader off of the Rams practice squad, who's a pretty solid running back,
I don't know anything about Cody
Schrader.
He
was a SEC leading rusher a couple of years ago. Niners signed him and tried to slip him through the practice squad, and the Rams said yoink and kept him on the active roster all year last year, even though they didn't really use him. And then they got yoinked by the Jags. But of course, you see that Jags-Rams connection there. You see, so probably Gladstone was one of the people, or trust the person who was like, Cody Schrader, we want that guy, and they got Cody Schrader. So we'll see, but a big moment for Cincinnati. I realize that with my ADD ADHD brain, I jumped off of our topic of those players
No, it's okay.
of Isaiah. We start with Isaiah Pacheco. So I want to try to get through a few of these guys.
Okay, let's get back to it. Yes.
Mark Andrews.
Just talked about him a lot on the Chop podcast, which we encourage, if you're in a guillotine league, we encourage you to check out the Chop podcast, all about guillotine leagues and only guillotine leagues. Mark Andrews was the 7th most chopped player. He basically didn't get the ball. Now part of it, a lot of it was just game script. I mean, Derrick Henry was an unstoppable juggernaut in this game, and why wouldn't you keep running him? And if it weren't for Henry's fumble at the end of the game, it would have all, the Ravens would have won, and this thing would all have a different outcome. And with Isaiah Likely out, man, I thought Andrews was sitting on a big game. I felt I had more confidence in him right here than I had in a long time, and we got nothing. Now he does face the Browns this week. He scored in both games against the Browns last week. Browns gave up a touchdown to Noah Fant last week, and so I want to believe that that they'll go back to him if, assuming that Derrick Henry's not going to rumble for almost 200 yards again. That will end up getting Mark Andrews, and it's going to play out a lot like last year. I'm nervous where, he's going to get these dud games, and then he's going to get hot, and you're going to have a hard time figuring out when you can start him and when you can't. But at the end of the day, he's still a really good player, and he's an end zone hog. He was the second highest end zone target percentage tight end last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He made it. He started out basically like floating in the water for the first 5 weeks or so last year for fantasy, and then he just went on a touchdown scoring streak. And that's one of those things where he can have fantasy value just by riding the wake of this offense. And sometimes that's fine. A tight end, that'll do. But a couple of factors I think are intersecting that are a problem for him. One is DeAndre Hopkins. Where it was Mark Andrews, that's our red zone guy. Yeah. What if DeAndre Hopkins becomes the sometimes red zone guy? That he has the game.
His catch was awesome.
Yeah, that builds trust. And then, like you said, Isaiah Likely comes back soon, and he's a red zone guy. So if you're putting Mark Andrews in just for touchdowns, then maybe there are fewer routes to those touchdowns, literally, figuratively. But the other thing is, Paul, and this is me going on Narrative Street, and I think all this applies to Travis Kelce also. I'm not saying to drop Travis Kelce. Try to trade him. But they just don't influence the game anymore.
Yeah.
Like, defenses aren't saying, okay, we have to account for him. Like, one of the keys to stopping this offense is the way this player is used. And if we can keep them from doing that, we're going to make life harder for them. They're just not one of those. That's why he was even on the trade block to begin with. And it's probably why no team was like, nah, we'll pass. Yeah, we're not going to give up a 3rd or 4th round pick for a guy who doesn't really change the defense, doesn't change the way a defense approaches. Like, that's what I see when I watch Mark Andrews. That's why I was so in Isaiah Likely, which I had to take an L on early in training camp.
I hear you on that. The other thing is, like last week, Lamar Jackson threw 19 passes. You just know it's hard to feed anybody. They got Zay Flowers had the great game, but you can't get a second player to have a good game on 19 passes. And the Ravens will do that sometimes. Yeah. And that's how they're built. That's how Todd Monken runs it. It's how Greg Roman ran that pass play percentage as well. So that's the other part you have to bake in. And I think Andrews remains just super touchdown dependent. Got to pick your spots. But next week might be one of those spots against Cleveland.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly Cleveland. Again, we may look back and say, well, while he has Joe Burrow's number, I don't know if anybody's going to have Lamar Jackson's number at this point. Okay, a few other players that I think are good players to toss up and say, do we just already move on? Matthew Golden.
Well, no, but I mean, disappointing that he only got the 3 catches. I thought he would be a much bigger part. The universal drumbeat coming out of training camp suggested he was going to walk right into wide receiver 1 roles, and instead, he was an afterthought. Now I haven't seen. I don't have his snap count in front of me. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing it was 3rd. Reed might have been 1. I mean, here's Reed out here with a Jones fracture in his foot, and he's all over the field. It's that added to my confidence with Golden. I'd gotten to a stage where I had talked myself into Golden as a week 1 starter with no hesitation, like I had with, Egbuka was, a high confidence week 1 rookie wide receiver starter, and not very many of those, but I thought Golden was going to be one. obviously I think way too early to write him off. And and the Packers look like they might be really, really good. So certainly not selling yet on a first round talent off of one bad game. Do you feel any differently?
I mean, again, the funny thing is, like, I don't have to ask you this. Like, if you have to drop Golden to get Boutte, I think your answer is, well, yeah. Well, I mean, if I have, that's what it takes. That's what I have to do.
Yeah.
But and it's harder. I mean, I don't know if putting Johnson's out there or Keenan Allen is out there, depending on your league. So coming up with a name compelling enough to drop Golden right now might be tougher unless you're in a really short bench league. But the snap count, since you asked about, he was in on 22 snaps in the game.
That's it. Oh,
yeah, 23. I'm sorry, Wicks was 23. Here's the breakdown. Let's just go ahead and Romeo Doubs. Okay, Romeo Doubs 34, Golden 23, Wicks 22, Reed 18, and Malik Heath 11, Sabian Williams 3.
That's depressing.
The
answer to this Packers question might continue to just be draft Jordan Love and not.
I mean, and the sad thing about him is he came out on a heater, but he still really didn't have a great fantasy game. So again, this is the opposite of our opening question, Paul, where the defense can be so good that it limits the offense. The defense can be so bad it limits the offense, and the defense because there's some sort of mathematical figure, geometric shape, that applies to this, right? That like at the extremes, one side can skew the other,
This is a little bit like politics where, at some point, like the political, spectrum wraps around against, back to itself. And maybe that's, maybe that can happen with you get a defense that's so good that the offense just doesn't have to be explosive.
It doesn't want to be really, that's the thing.
Right.
I mean, they're, and then imagine what happens when you add Christian Watson to the mix sometime during the season.
Yeah, well, and that's probably going to happen at some point. Right. That would water everything down even more right now. Right. So,
but excitement for the Packers. I mean, just really quick, just because you have covered Minnesota for so long and you're up there, and it's like Green Bay is like your cousin. Didn't you think it was such a uncharacteristically bold move for that franchise that kind of announced like whatever? It's like it's like those videos when the guy that looks like an accountant gets out on the dance floor and is actually like the best dancer at the wedding. Right. It was like the Packers saying like, you know what? That's enough of this conservative, slow and sure wins the race. We're going for it.
How I prefer this analogy, the librarian who takes her hair out of the bun and all that. Yeah, right. Shakes the hair out and right. I prefer that.
My morning jacket actually has a song about like the sexy librarian.
No, I don't.
That's why my morning jacket's great anyway.
That's inspired. This is not like the Packers, but when the trade is it's such an absurdly good trade for them. You're giving up pick 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 in back-to-back years. Easy. Yeah. Easy. The odds of you landing two players that combined are as good as Micah Parsons, no chance. So I felt like that was, as a Viking fan, it was honestly depressing that they gave up so little to get him. The only thing that Viking fans are comforting themselves with is the cost. He's become a very expensive player. And now this team, as everybody has heard, he's got $100 million a year wrapped up into two guys, but salary cap keeps growing. If you keep drafting great, you can afford to do that. And the Packers draft really, really well. That's Minnesota doesn't. And that's what's really the bind Minnesota finds themselves in is they've found good undrafted free agents. They've signed free agents well. Jordan Mason looks like he's going to be a hit. But this team can't draft at all. And that's been a huge problem. So, granted, they drafted JJ McCarthy, and maybe at some point we'll talk about him too.
Well, let's do it. I mean, you're here, so we got to talk Vikings. We got to talk Vikings. I seeing JJ McCarthy last night, I was reminded of a Milan Kundera book, great Czech author, like from the Iron Curtain days. Wrote a lot about that stuff. And I remember one of his books, there was this notion that like the first 3 days of a relationship are basically like how the whole relationship plays out. Kind of like a fractal, right? Like you can just take that first little bit and it just is a repeating pattern,
Expands.
and it just
Okay.
expands. So if that's JJ McCarthy's career, if that debut is what we're in for, because truly he tested people's ability to make conclusions based on what they're watching. Because I think that it was easy to say that, wow, like he's really like, oh yeah, look at how few passes he threw. Even though he was efficient and a winner, when a college offense isn't based on that quarterback, like why are we talking about this guy in the first round? And so on and so forth. Like, and then he said it was that pass to Jalen Naylor right before halftime. And let this be, I'm looking into the camera because all the NFL coaches watch my show, Paul. Let this be a reminder. Give your guys chances to make plays. Trust them. Don't think of like, what if he gets sacked and turns out, oh, let's just go into the locker room. And it's a whole mentality. Like, if you don't trust your players to make plays, why did you decide to get up that morning and coach football anyway? You know, if you're not going to implore your guys to, like, yeah, like we got this much time, go make a play. Let's try to get 3 points. And he said when he just kind of felt the ball come out of his hand, why, you know, he's like, okay, just like, yeah, all right. And he said he felt it start to come together for him. And then you saw what happened. And then you have the magic of confidence, and you have the magic of confidence of your teammates. And I think you could see that everybody on that team believes in him. I mean, actually believes in him. Doesn't like just say, well, that's our guy, but they really believe in him. I think the same way the Packers believe in Jordan Love. That was a big part of Jordan Love's up and down first year, is that while he was struggling, the team was like, hey, man, we believe in you. His teammates were saying, we believe in you. So what a roller coaster ride. What did you think?
I think they do believe in McCarthy, but I think the bigger thing they believe in is Kevin O'Connell. I just think I think these players have now through 3 years been conditioned to believing that Kevin O'Connell's going to find ways to get this team victories, and it's been uncanny. All the comeback wins, the one score wins, and I understand everybody keeps saying mathematically it can't keep happening, but it does, and these people just believe in the system. O'Connell is a really, really good coach who is granted not won a playoff game yet, but nevertheless, I think we can still say that our reigning coach of the year is really, really good. And it's the sample size is starting to grow. And I just think it's the culture, the environment, the trust, and all of these things. And at some point, you know, your lead pin is still your quarterback, and he's still got to have a certain amount of viability. Looks like JJ McCarthy's going to have it. And there was a lot of deleted tweets last night at halftime. But he looks awfully good, Sig. That was there was, you know, just to see him rebound and show the poise, and some of the arm traits that we wanted to see. And given a little more time in the pocket, which had been a problem, you know, just he's hiking the ball with half a second left on the clock, and you know, getting very little time in the pocket in the first half, and just to have it all start to gel was really, really important for him ultimately. And it's promising. It's only one game, but probably an easier test this week against the Falcons than the one they just endured in Chicago. A tough place to play, granted, missing a couple of cornerbacks. But
and again, for 3 quarters, it looked like the opening chapter of the story is go into Soldier Field and get humiliated by the Bears defense, which is, you know, I mean, that's a story. That's the beginning of the story. I said, I've been saying it until people get sick of me saying it, that the NFL is the great American novel now. There is no, I think literature, I mean, that's like a 20th century thing at this point, right? I mean, but watching this play out in real time, the way these stories, the true nature of things, at least in that moment, reveals itself, and how the stories can get yanked like whiplash quick from one, it means this, to all of a sudden the whole meaning is, like, now it's not that JJ McCarthy got humiliated by the Bears defense. It's that even when the Bears defense has their foot on his throat, he can fight his way off of them and end up being the victor, and how that gives him confidence. And kept really quickly on Kevin O'Connell, I want to throw this back to you because you would know. What's fascinating about that to me, I've always said, another one of my cliches, that teams take on the personality of their head coach and or their quarterback. And with Kevin O'Connell, what's so wonderful, I think, especially for people like us, Paul, he's a nice guy. Like, he's actually a nice guy.
He's so nice. He is I don't know, like everything Bill Belichick wasn't embodied in one person. He is He's thoughtful. He's kind. He's just there to make everybody better. And when he came to Minnesota, coming out of the Mike Zimmer era, which couldn't have been more different, what part of what the Vikings loved about him is he kept talking about building teamwork and building assets around himself and empowering people to be great, and not trying to harvest power into one place. And he's done a really good job of that. And you want to see a small version of that with Kevin O'Connell. He lets his position coaches call plays for a quarter of preseason games because he wants to give them play calling experience.
Mm-hmm.
Who does that?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. You want to make your position coaches want to kill for you. They will do whatever it takes. Those are the kinds of things that Kevin O'Connell does that you just don't see every day. Not to mention the fact that he also did an open mic live fourth quarter of one game on a Vikings preseason television.
Wow.
I don't know if you caught that.
No, that's awesome. Well, this means you have nothing to hide and nothing to fear,
Isn't that the truth? So O'Connell, when he's got one of his position coaches or doing play calling, O'Connell is on mic with the TV and radio broadcast crew for the whole time. It's just open mic.
Great.
And he's talking about the plays and he's talking about what's coming. And I mean, it's just, there's no other head coach that does that stuff.
Yeah.
He's just so good.
Yeah, he is. And it starts with ownership too. I think it's probably like when you have this culture of we trust the people we hire to do their job and we're not going to tell them how to do their job or get involved in their job. That's a culture thing. But it's really great to see, like you said, the opposite of Bill Belichick. Not that Bill Belichick in that way, it's like we get back to like human psychology. Like you said, some of this does lead back even into politics, like, your views on like authoritarianism and things like that. But we know that Kevin O'Connell is not an authoritarian, and not in the least bit an authoritarian in the way that he coaches the team. And I think you bring up a really interesting point too, because we're talking psychology here, is that, it's kind of like when you get divorced or you break up. In some ways, the way the next person you date is different than the person you broke up with may influence the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So again, like coming off of Mike Zimmer, I mean, like almost, I think it's a natural inclination anyway, but it's almost like when teams move on from a head coach, they should say in a postmortem, like, what went wrong from a personality standpoint, and who can we get that's going to repair that by the way that they coach the team. And I think teams do this naturally. Okay, we got just a few minutes before off the rails. And I want to do like a kind of a lightning round thing on 4 offenses that looked better than we thought, and like whether we should be excited or not. Okay.
I'm tempted to guess the 4, but
go ahead. Guess the 4. That's fun. Guess the 4.
Well, it's okay. Steelers have to be one. Okay, so Steelers 34 points. Am I correct about that? Four touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers. I think if we're going to get down to the sustainability of that, I don't love the sustainability of them being a high-powered offense necessarily. It doesn't feel to me like that's probably going to be something that we're going to keep going with the Steelers, but maybe better than we thought. I loved the fact that the ball distribution from Aaron Rodgers wasn't all DK Metcalf. Calvin Austin, 6 targets. Freiermuth was involved. Jonnu Smith was involved. I think that's exceptionally healthy. And now they got to find a running game. And I don't know that Jalen Warren's going to be able to carry that. But that was, I think that part of it was very promising. And I thought Aaron Rodgers, honestly, it's also easy to hate Aaron Rodgers. But I think objectively, if you looked at his game, Aaron Rodgers played well.
Yeah. Well,
and I think if you don't see that, I think it's because of some bias that you've got against Aaron Rodgers.
He executed the plays. He just went out and played football. And he's got those little wrist snap throws that can be accurate, and he has the crafty old man game stuff that he can do, and it fits well with what Arthur Smith wants. And if maybe for both the Steelers and for Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of an exhale, let's relax. Like Aaron Rodgers is past the sort of I'm the center of attention section of his late career, and is now just like, I just want to be a football player again and be with my guys, And Mike Tomlin's like, guess what? I got the leadership of this team. We got our house in order, so you can just come here and be a football player. So we'll see. Okay, who do you think the other three exciting offenses maybe?
Jets have to be in the
Yep.
conversation. I thought for sure, I really believed this was going to be a bad game for every part
Me
of the Jets
too.
offense. Totally wrong. And delighted for Justin Fields, who looked, I thought, passed the ball really well, ran the ball against a Steelers defense that gave up the third fewest quarterback rushing yards last year. And he ran the ball effectively. The deep touchdown pass was really pretty, and just happy to see Justin Fields performing well. And the two players that I think everybody was down on, Breece Hall, couldn't find anybody to draft him. He looked great. He looked every bit like the Breece Hall of 2 years ago, and really impressed with his game. And then Garrett Wilson, who we kept talking about, oh, shucks, he's a really good receiver, stuck in a bad spot. Well, it just turns out he's a good receiver.
Yeah. And
Garrett Wilson.
And he's in a decent spot now.
He's okay, decent.
He's not in a bad spot
better than we thought
with his teammate.
Yes.
And I think for me, the big aha moment with Justin Fields was there were at least two moments in the game when the play broke down and he kept his eyes and his attention downfield and completed passes. And if he can add that, if defenses can no longer he went to the top of his drop, he didn't deliver the ball, we can go into he's going to run mode. If he can throw counter punches where defenses can start to try to advance on him, and then that creates openings in the secondary that he takes advantage of, and just the psychological effect, because their running game is going to be badass. I mean, you said Breece Hall was magnificent. Remember, there were 3 rushing touchdowns this game. He got 0 of them. So, I mean, it was an even much bigger game was there, and their running game. And the other thing I want to say, hats off to Tanner Engstrand and hats off to this offense, because no one was talking about Elijah Vera Tucker. No one's like, well, they lost their best offensive lineman.
Right.
Nobody was even talking about that. They have a good, I think Steve Hayden is the offensive line coach there. They have a good offensive line, which we're going to come back to on another one of these two offenses. 3 minutes before off the rails. Who's offense number 3?
Got to be the Colts.
There it is. And that's the one with the good offensive line, Tony Sperano Jr.
Yeah, how about that? And and this is a Colts offensive line that lost several key players.
2 Minnesota
center, guard. Yeah, 2 Minnesota. So I was very, very nervous about this one. Daniel Jones, Indiana Jones, as they're now calling him, is I thought he looked really good. And Tyler Warren being involved this much early. And here's midway through Sunday, I'm saying to myself, I've gone from feeling like Indy had nobody to throw to now I feel like Indy's suddenly deep in receiver targets. Yeah. And what a turnaround for them. I thought Shane Steichen might have been the first head coach fired. I again had this really wrong, and really nice to say. I'm happy for Daniel Jones. We were only a couple of seasons removed from Daniel Jones being one of the best most reliable fantasy quarterbacks out there, and we might have that back again with him. And now he's not going to get the ball to 1 yard. He's not going to sneak in 2 touchdowns every week. But even if you take that out of his game, Daniel Jones delivered the ball to his playmakers and let them be good.
Yeah, and the variable here is a Miami team that look like they're trying to get their coach fired, and this week they face Denver. So if this offense is competitive, if it's just competitive against Denver, because their schedule gets pretty easy after that. So look out. And Daniel Jones is 2 years now removed from an ACL tear. That could be part of it. Shane Steichen, at times we have said, this is one of the stories of week 1. If they don't have a quarterback, they suck. Offensive coordinators, play callers. If they have a quarterback, oh, wow, look at all the great ideas they have. Look at how they work,
Yeah, funny.
Okay, who's your guess for the last offense?
Well, this is trickier. Not Minnesota. Not Chicago. They put up 24.
The run heavy.
I give
Chargers.
Oh, sure. Chargers. Yes. Justin Herbert played great.
Supporting 3 wide receivers value.
Yeah. How about that? Which I'm sure most of us also did not necessarily see that coming. Herbert I thought it just nice to see him healthy, and standing in a pocket, looking at Keenan Allen. We are 1 year removed from Keenan Allen as wide receiver 3 in PPR.
And he's still that guy. I mean, he's still the same player.
He still got that.
Yeah, he's still the
They
same
targeted
player.
him 10 times in the game.
And on a lot of money downs, too. I think Herbert could easily be a top 5 quarterback this year. And this is super exciting. And I think a lot of it is the precursor here was he was hurt last year. And Jim Harbaugh's psyop with him, like building him up, saying all these ridiculous, like Paul Bunyan kind of things about him, is to coax him
Yeah.
out of his shell and into the greatness that is clearly in him. He looked so in tune with everything. Last thing I'll say about week one before I'm going to toss it to Paul. Yeah, that's right. Is I just want to say Puka Nacua is the man. He's just the man. It's like
He's so good.
Jared Verse called him a psychopath, and I'm telling you, when I saw that quote, it was like back in June or July. It was a day whenever like the secondary had a pretty good day, except against Puka because he's a psychopath. That's what Jared Verse said after a practice. I'm like, I want that. And then Mike Tomlin called the Steelers kicker who made a 60-yarder to win a serial killer. So
I love
we're
it.
getting dark,
Yeah.
but maybe not
graphic.
maybe not so dark and off the rails because we're so close, Paul and I, and you've been generous to really be vulnerable and honest about so many things in the moment, but also we had that kind of chemistry where we did this once before, it went well. So off the rails, which I'm taking up time jabbering, I'm going to hand it off to you as you are now steering as we go off the rails.
Well, and I like that. I've taken a handful of notes during our conversation of things I wanted to loop back
Okay,
on with
great.
you. Tell me about the psychology that desperately wants us to eat our L's. As they very much want us more so, I think, even to be right on Kayshon Boutte, they want us to come back and say, I was wrong about this. This is this thing I didn't get right. And people, there's some part of human nature that wants us to acknowledge our missteps in a very public way.
Yeah, I think that, and maybe it's a little more cute with us fantasy football experts because our job is so ridiculous. Like every time someone asks me
Yes,
what my job is,
it is.
Paul, I make a face, and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna be good," because I don't even. I'm like, I almost feel like I'm disrespecting people when they have a job. Like I'm an EMT. Oh, I'm a fantasy football expert. Um,
Right.
Anyway, and I think that because it's a privilege to do this, they want to throw tomatoes at us sometimes. But I think hopefully the larger point in the psychology, and I think parenting. We'll come back to parenting again, and in a lot of other scenarios, being someone's boss or superior. Like when you can admit your mistake, it makes people trust you. If you're willing to tell the truth about your mistake, then you're coming to me in good faith.
I'm going through a life situation I'm not going to detail here that does involve accountability. And I think that's a accountability. People are very I think people are mostly very understanding of your mistakes and your foibles as human beings, that you're not going to be perfect. The people that are really inspiring are in many cases the people who just have accountability. And it's hard to do that. And I don't think I've always been as good at I don't think I've always been as good about that as I should have been. And if I look back and as my roles in my professional career and my personal life, I wish I had done more along those lines with accountability and owning mistakes and just being honest with myself and others about it. And it's hard to do. There's we're many of us are ego driven people, and even if you do have a public persona or not, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, I think that, this is one of those things, Paul, and wow, like we're going deep. We always do, and we only have a few minutes. But I think there's really fertile ground here to till and to share with people because hopefully by all of us spending time together through this fantasy football podcast sphere and culture and community we have, we allow each other to unburden ourselves in a way that like you can my stepson Noah, like almost like our prayers were answered when a family moved in down the street a few years ago, and they have 3 kids, and their oldest kid is Noah's
Mm.
best friend. And I tell Noah, I'm like, man,
Oh,
you get to have your best friend live down the street. Like you don't even know how lucky you are. um
yeah.
but they both, what they say, that's really touching is that they can be themselves around each other, and they're 12. So it's like you don't even want to be yourself when you're 12. Everyone's awkward, you know? And I think that when someone can be willing to admit their flaws and their shortcomings and mistakes, their frailties, then it, my I'm really going to start. You really got me going because my mom, would say, and I think this is a quality that hopefully I've gotten from my mom, and I think that my wife certainly has it too. She would always tell me, Siggy, watch out for the crazies, and they all find me and want to talk to me. But the reason is people can feel when you're non-judgmental. People can feel that, like, I feel safe with you, and I feel like I can actually, like, show my real face and tell the truth about, like, how my life is going and what's happening in my life. And that again comes back to, like, if you can admit you made mistakes and say, like, well, give me my whooping, I earned it. Then that makes people feel like, well, you must not be judgmental if you're willing to show people you also are flawed.
That's in the couch right there, on the couch right there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what this podcast is, this is a safe space, for people to talk about anything and be right and be wrong, and we're both wrong lots about a
Yeah.
lot of things we talk about, but you know what it is it's safe. And, that's I know there are people listening, they're like, "Oh, safe spaces." That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just some place where it's okay to be vulnerable and be wrong and accept that. And that's I don't know, I'd rather just, that's the hallmark of what you've built here, Sig.
Yeah.
It's not just with me, it's with all of your guests. And it's a place where you can just come on and be
Yeah, be
yourself. And
yourself.
that's
And
yeah.
it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I love people. Sometimes the idea of people or what people do en masse can cause me a lot of distress and angst. But individual people, mostly the encounters are uplifting. Always, almost always, like a soul to soul, namaste. Right, the universe in me recognizes the universe in you. Um, so I think that we can try to do that for each other every day, in that way, because I think where this show intersects with what you talked about was I was going to try to be the next great sportscaster, new at the Newhouse School, and humble brag, and I
That's a good well, it's a great school.
yeah, I dropped that, but I dropped out after a year and a half. I went and studied philosophy instead because it just wasn't for me, because big media, that's not the way we actually talk to each other. That's not the way we actually exist and live. That is some sort of product. That's artificial.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in this time of AI, oh boy, why am I bringing that up in minute 58? But the real is what we're going to keep seeking, the real inside of ourselves and the real out in the world and in other people that reinforces that. And in some ways, Paul, I think that, when people feel seen and heard and you validate people's existence, like, it can just be so much more powerful than you can contemplate. Like, what for us might be like just almost like a throwaway moment, for somebody else can be something that they're going to take with them and give
Yes.
them hope.
Like somebody validating your move to Utah
Yeah.
and
Hey.
telling you, that's, if it spoke to you, you're meant to be there.
Well, and that's,
And
what's good for you, right? If it feels good, what did James Brown say? If it feels good to you, it must be good for you. But no, thank you. And what Paul is quickly alluding to is, if you ever want, like, a confidant who will talk you out of any sort of impulsive choices, I am not the person. I am not going to tell you don't do that impulsive thing, because it's just the way I live, and I think it's the way our what our souls need, and really why we're here. We're here to make some choices and see how they go, just like we do every year with our fantasy football teams, and like you did to join Paul and I today and spend this time with us, which it means a lot, and that we're still getting to do this is a great privilege. But really, the privilege is getting to serve all of you wonderful people, all the goodwill in the community that in this show that Paul talked about is just harnessing what you all send to me every day. And why do you do that for me every day? Because you're so, so, so classy.